Hello and welcome to the Crystal Confab. I'm Nicholas, and I'm joined today by three of my three favorite human beings, especially in this crystal world, Adam, Ashley, and Kyle. And every week we get together and confab about a new crystal. And this week we've got kind of a fun stone coming out of the toolbox, and I think it'll be a great conversation. We get to unpack a whole lot about it. And that stone is Bumblebee Jasper. So I'd love to pass it off to Kyle to get us started to talk about the makeup and nature of this stone.
I am so excited to talk about what I like to refer to, and I think we all are more inclined to refer to as Bumblebee Stone than Bumblebee Jasper. And this is an important differentiation. Let me get my mouth around that. It's important to know that a jasper has quartz as its base. Its microcrystalline quartz is what makes a jasper a jasper. They throw jasper on anything that is opaque. We have talked about this in our Red Jasper podcast. Jump back to it if you haven't listened. This is a stone because a stone is a makeup or an amalgamation of multiple minerals, at least two, sometimes more. Lapis lazuli is a great example of a stone or a rock because it has lazulite, it has calcite, it has pyrite together. This bumblebee stone, if you are watching, as you can see, is beautiful layers of orange, gray, black, and yellow. It comes from, now I'm going to read my notes because I don't want to stuff up the pronunciation, Mount Siramai or Chiramai in Indonesia. West Java. It is a volcanic area and it has up to or over at least half a dozen minerals within it. It has sulphur, it has orpiment, it has realgar, it has aragonite, it has calcite, and it has pyrite within it. So it has all of these really interesting things going on inside it. And what's really important is if you can find pieces that have actually been, this is something we've talked about as well, been sealed, coated, or reinforced with some form of lacquer because it has toxic minerals within it. It has arsenic, it has sulfur, it has them within the orpiment and the realgar especially. What's really important is, especially if you're going to wear it, hold it and connect with it in that way because you don't want to be absorbing the literal toxic levels of these minerals that are contained. If you have these sorts of pieces, which I do have a couple of, these aren't properly lacquered, I don't touch them too much. I will wash my hands afterwards and I will always make sure that I'm cleaning after working with them. Otherwise, if they have been coated, they're going to be fine. It's important to ask when you purchase, I think, when you're getting them. Yes, Ashley.
Kyle, is there any other way that we can know if they're coated? And does it have to necessarily be like coated and stabilized? Or what about just a really, like a high polish like you would find on most tumbled stones? Because I know if you think about something like a fibrous malachite, right? A little bit more problematic when it's just that powdery sort of malachite compared to when it's been polished, it's sort of fine. Same with, potentially maybe something like tiger's eye, right? All those little chrysotolite fibers, polished, fine, because they're trapped in that quartz. What's the deal with this if we just get like a tumbled stone?
Well, I think part of the tumbling process is often actually having some form of acrylic or gel or something that actually helps to stabilize it in the process. And I think high polished material take on a little bit of that smoothness within it, and it helps to contain what's there. Honestly, don't quote me on it because I don't 100% know what everyone's doing in their tumbling process, to be quite honest with you. I always just err on the side of caution with Bumblebee Stone. It's just one of those ones that I would say just wash your hands afterwards.
It's one of those ones that also when you're looking at your tumbles, I know you'll see a bowl of them. Some of them will have, I've seen it in pendants as well. They have little dips in them where you can kind of see there's raw stuff in there. And that would kind of be the ones I would be avoiding and look for something that is a bit more, in our eyes, would be a bit more perfect because then you know it's well sealed all round. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think that's a really great way of looking at things. And it's the kind of thing that basically lean away from jewelry because we sweat as humans, especially if it's open backed, you're wearing it as a pendant or a bracelet. We as humans will sweat, and that's the biggest way that you can kind of make it absorb into your skin. So just be careful. It's one of those ones, but I'm not going to say don't work with it because it's one of my favorites and I love working with it. And I think it's really important to work with it as a connection.
What about with a piece, you said that it has all these different things in it, maybe up to upwards of a dozen different types of minerals inside. So if we have like one with really, really vibrant orange, like maybe more Realgar, more Orpiment, use a little more caution, don't handle quite so much.
Like a snake or a frog that's brightly colored, like the more acerbic its color, I think is a good way to look at things and go, maybe I won't touch that one so much because it's a little bit more harsh. But I think that's kind of where a lot of its energy actually is directed. There has this connection. I think anything that has sulfur, orpiment, realgar, they're very powerful. They help with manifestation, the will, confidence, inner strength. But I also feel like they help us with toxicity in our own lives. They help us with toxic people, toxic situations, toxic behaviors. And this is something that I've especially achieved through working with sulfur and anything that's sulfur based. I love sulfur in quartz, sulfur crystals. Being half Sicilian, I have a cluster of sulfur that comes from Sicily near Mount Etna. And what's really interesting is these come from cracks in the earth crust. This material has formed with the crack, that little opening, it's got heat, it's got pressure. And so all of these things are coming together. For me, it's very like the beginnings of the earth, like when things are forming in really funky, complex ways, when you've got all of this stuff coming from the magma up through and then solidifying. And I think the Aragonite and the Calcite are that really interesting connection to forming quickly, because Aragonite and Calcite as minerals form quicker than, say, quartz and beryl and sapphires. They take less time and they can form over a shorter period, which means it can entrap these other minerals like sulfur, like orpiment, like realgar. And I think if you break them down, you can break down how they work and then bring them together back as a team so that you can work with them. I've broken them down to a couple of words for each one. Calcite brings clarity and awareness. Aragonite, perception and calm. Pyrite, manifestation and practicality. Sulphur, disruptivity and cleansing. Orpiment, positivity and confidence. And realgar, protection and creativity. So as a combination, you're bringing inner confidence, you're bringing protection, you're bringing practicality, you're bringing enthusiasm, you're bringing excitement. And I think that's where like the naming of the Bumblebee Stone really works, because bees do their thing. They do the thing, they do their job, they work, they go out looking for the flowers, they pollinate, they get the thing, they go back and they make the honey. Like, we as humans overthink everything. We're so drawn to overthink everything. And I think that's where Bumblebee Stone comes into its own of like, stop overthinking, use your mind well, use your energy well, do what you need to do, simplify and make it happen instead of overthinking and getting yourself stuck in inaction. And I think that's where I love working with Bumblebee Stone, to do the thing, to get going, to make things happen, to push myself creatively, to get out of my comfort zone. If I need to do public speaking, if I need to create something where I feel a bit stuck and I don't know how to make it happen, I think instead of thinking about what I can't do, it brings you to all the little things that you can do. If you break them all down, it's like, what little things can I do? I can maybe do a bit of research and read a couple of books before I start something. Maybe I need to break it down into bite-sized chunks so I can see what's easiest to do first and maybe where I need a little bit of help. It allows you to, I think that's calcite really coming into its own. I love calcite for finding clarity in situations. And I think bringing that to the fore is really important with Bumblebee Stone. It's not just about like playing in positivity, which we love. It's actually about like, what can I do? And that helps you to feel more positive.
I loved how you read through all those different traits for all those different crystals and brought that together. And this is definitely a dynamic crystal. I think dynamism would be a really nice summary word for it as well. You know, in a lot of the episodes, I've just reflected on the past. We've been talking about how we live in a crazy world, and these certain crystals help us to slow down. And I think that's going to be natural of anything from the crystal world, because they develop over time. They have a patience to them. But I also get a feeling with Bumblebee Stone and other kind of more toxic crystals like cinnabar would be another great example, that we do live in a crazy world, and sometimes we've got to thrive in the crazy. And as you were talking about these, I think this is a great one for actually helping you to get out there and do what you need to do. What do you reckon about that, Carl?
1000%. I think if you can like see all of these amazing little things, like it helps you to see that there's incredible energy out there in the world. It helps you to see that why not? Right. And we're in the last kind of week of Sagittarius season with this reading. We're moving into Capricorn energy. Capricorn is very practical. It's very self-motivated as a sign. So I think it's really nice to work with the self-motivating energy like Bumblebee Stone. Sagittarian energy is motivated and can be influenced by what's going on around it really easily. Whereas Capricorn is like, what am I doing? This is my job. This is what I'm doing. And this is how I'm going to do it. There is never a Capricorn that I've met that doesn't have a plan, right? And that is so important sometimes to go, what can I do? How can I do it? And how can I break things down and feel good about myself? I find stones that have this quick forming and also like volcanic energy, like obsidians as well, they really help us to like cut the crap, get the shit out of our world, excuse me, that we need to get rid of out of our life, out of our head, out of our experience, so that we can actually manifest what we're trying to manifest, right? At its core, there is pyrite within it. Pyrite is such a stone of creating for yourself and manifesting what you need and leading your life. Orpiment and Realgar, I think are like, they're like fire dancers to me. They're like a male and female fire dancing pair, and you see them and it's amazing and it's enigmatic and it's like excitement. It builds and it helps you to go, I'm excited about my life. I want to do what I want to do and I'm allowed to be excited about it. And even if other people aren't excited about it, and I want to say, especially for you guys in the Northern Hemisphere going into winter, it's a time where for me, I get seasonal depression. Like that enthusiasm through winter like lacks and it falls off the complete bandwagon. And I need a little bit of help to just do what I need to do in my life. And that's when I'm often more drawn to something like Bumblebee Stone instead of during summertime, which we are now in the Southern Hemisphere. I love it. It gives more, but I think I'm more drawn to it when I need to like head down, bum up, focus on what I need to focus on and get the jobs done that I need to get done with excitement though, with happiness, with enthusiasm, and with a positive mindset going, I can, I will. And then when I get to the other side of this task, then I'm going to be able to do all these other things. It helps you to kind of, I find it like dangling the carrot in front of one's self. Really good for that sort of pushing yourself along, giving yourself that motivation, giving yourself something to work towards, but also then rewarding yourself with something because you've done the work, you've done the thing, you've worked so hard and created something, you've gotten through a really challenging situation. Have the honey at the end. You've made it. Enjoy it. Don't feel like you can't have. Don't feel like you can't reward yourself, and don't feel like you can't give to yourself, especially when others maybe don't have as much.
I love that, Kyle. And, I think this is one of the, it's such a bright and happy, joyous stone. I think it's a really great one, especially there's some significant astrological times that I think it's really, really great for. We often hear about midlife crisis. Now, there are some astrological moments in our lives that are quite significant, and it's worth looking at planetary returns. So this is when basically when you're born, all the planets are in a certain spot in the sky, and based on how long it takes them to go do a lap, they return back to their original spot. Now, probably the most well-known one or the most discussed one is Saturn returns. This happens around the age of somewhere between 29 and 31. And this is when you start to realize that, oh, hold on, I can't rely on my charm and my good looks and my youthful energy of my 20s. I'm actually have to get real about my life. And this can be a bit of I remember for me, I thought by 30 I'd be married. I thought I'd have a home and a career. And I was like, I'm still renting, I'm single. And so what did I do? I left my home city of Perth and moved to Melbourne kind of thing. And then another one that's quite interesting, which really kind of goes with that midlife crisis. And, this is all the ones where men start buying convertible cars and Harley Davidsons and things like this. Uranus opposition. So Uranus starts at one point, and when it's exactly 180 degrees, let me remember my mathematics, 180 degrees, so the opposite of where it was when you were born, this will be another time when you want to flip the lid. And for me, I ended a 13-year relationship and went and lived in the Middle East kind of thing. But bringing something in like Bumblebee Stone is going to really help you, instead of feeling deflated at these times, will really help you to go, okay, I'm going to change it, but I'm going to change it for the better, not for the worse in that way. Actually, do you find that this crystal is really quite, does it bring joy into your life?
It does. This is one of my favorite stones for bringing joy because I think the name of it really is apt. I'm fairly certain when we look at the stone, we can see why it is named Bumblebee Stone or Bumblebee Jasper. It has those, beautiful sort of yellow and black stripes like we would envision on a bumblebee. Even the layers are a bit soft, a bit fuzzy looking, and there is something about the bumblebee that does spark so much joy in my heart. I mean, how many memories and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but I don't think so. How many of us have memories where we can imagine like going out into the garden on one of the first warm days and seeing that the bumblebees have woken up and they're sort of buzzing around and just hearing that sound on the wind, watching them emerge out of a flower. Like that is, for me, that's like my paradise. That's my perfect joy, my perfect happiness. And I think that what I find so inspiring about this stone is its ability to challenge us to be present. And I think a lot of what Kyle was saying about this stone in particular and how it sort of sparks this joy and sparks this transformation and all these things that are happening really boils down to being present. When we can be present with that, we can sort of make some of these changes. And Nicholas and I have like discussions about bumblebeing all the time in our little neurodivergent circle of two. And bumblebee for us is when you're following the ADHD thought, like a little bumblebee from one flower to the next flower to the next flower, and you're just going around and collecting all the nectar and all the pollen, and and we can follow each other through that. And I think that what makes that so joyous is the bumblebee is just present. The bumblebee is like, yeah, I'm going to go over here and get this pollen and this nectar from this flower, but then I'm going to head over to this one. And ooh, that one looks really great too. Without a care in the world, just following its little bumblebee heart. And so that's what this stone reminds me of, is just being present in that joy, moving from flower to flower, sort of without a care in the world, but just letting your heart lead you, letting your heart lead you to what you're feeling passionate about, excited about, motivated about, joyful about. This is something that I think is a true gift of this stone. But there's another way that I really like to work with this crystal that's a little bit more unconventional, and that is for hearth blessing and hearth magic. So the hearth is such an important part of the home, right? Traditionally, this would have been maybe a fireplace, some sort of, brick oven, something like that, where cooking would have been done. It would have been used for warmth. It's where people would gather and tell stories. It was a place for communal gathering. It was this place of community and family and love and joy and happiness. And all of these things sort of revolved around the hearth. And I feel that warmth of Bumblebee Jasper so closely tied in with the hearth. And I think a lot of it also kind of ties back to what Kyle was saying about this stone's primordial beginnings and the way that it sort of comes out of the earth. Like that is very much like the human connection with fire. It's like has this primordial energy to it. So I love Bumblebee Jasper for connecting us with this idea of the hearth, because what the hearth is physically has changed for humans throughout history. Most of us don't have a central fire in the home, which we're using for cooking and heating and all those things. Maybe some people are fortunate enough to have a fireplace. Most of us have central heating, depending on where you live in the world, forced air heating of some type, heat pump, something. And then we have our kitchen, right? With our oven, our stove, your microwave, your air fryer, whatever it is that you use. But I like to think of the kitchen for me now as being that center of the hearth, that space where family gathering, communal gathering, nurturing each other, finding our joy still exists in a big way. And there are a few things in this world that bring me more joy than preparing a meal with family and sitting down to sort of eat that meal together, to be present with each other, to find that love and happiness and joy together. So I love to bring a piece of Bumblebee Stone into the kitchen, into that space where the hearth exists. And I actually have a small ancestor altar in my kitchen. I have one upstairs in my kind of sacred space, but then I have a small one in my kitchen to remind me to root into those communal practices, that familial love, those things that are so important to me. So on this small ancestor altar in my kitchen, I have a number of fossils because I love fossils for ancestral connections. So things like ammonites and echinoids, and we'll be talking about fossils, I think, pretty soon in a future episode where we can go into that more. But on this ancestor altar, I've also added a piece of Bumblebee Stone because I love that warmth and connection that it brings to the space. I love that anchor that it sort of holds to this concept of what the hearth is really meant to do, especially this idea of gathering, of togetherness, of spending that time, enjoying company, sharing stories, preparing a meal together. And so placing a bumblebee jasper in a place of prominence somewhere in your kitchen where it's away from your food, because as we learned from Kyle, it's important to keep this stone, a little bit in a safe space. But because we can't use it for a lot of things that we normally would consider using our crystals for, like a gem water or elixir, wouldn't be safe to use that way. Or, handling really frequently for meditation, it might not be safe to use that way. So having it just in a place of prominence as this physical reminder, something you can sort of look at and remind you, oh, that's right, this is my gathering space. This is my space where I create nourishing meals with love. This is my place where we sit down and share stories, where we connect with each other, and where we honor our ancestors for teaching us skills that we need to survive, for making us who we are in a lot of ways, for better or for worse. And I think that that is something really magical about this stone. So just placing it in that prominent place and having an intention for that. Every time I see this stone, because most of us are going to be in the kitchen at least once every day, right? Every time I see this stone, I will remember to, and you fill in the blank, give thanks, take a few deep breaths, prepare something nourishing and healthy. Maybe it's just to, take a moment to show your gratitude for your ancestors or for your family. The beauty here is you can really make it whatever you want to make it, but it's a simple practice that's rooted into gathering in the heart of the home.
And if anyone's listening to this when this episode first drops, we're going to be knee deep into the holiday season. For some people, it is a time when family getting together, and there may be some stress, some overwhelm, and different things like this. But with the positivity and the joyousness of Bumblebee Stone, this is really going to help to kind of create a bit more joyous energy around that time, won't it, Ashley?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And, reminding us to find that joy even in the chaos, I think is important to remind us the things that are special and important about our family, even if they're difficult. But also just to celebrate getting together, to celebrate the fact that we can be with one another, not just at the holiday time, but really any time. And that we can also show that gratitude from near or far, and that we can follow the joy in our heart like the bumblebee moving from flower to flower. And I think I saw Kyle, did you have something you wanted to add too?
I think that comes to its complexity of its makeup, having all of these different things come together. We can like go, all of these things can come together, right? All of us people can be different and we can all come together in the same room and contribute something, be something. Like I see it as a team. When you have more than 6 minerals all working together, right? Yet they have to come together as some form of team. And so we can see that we can collaborate and connect and I think be more open with each other with something like Bumblebee Stone without getting offended, without taking things on, without coming in with chips on our shoulder.
Oh, that is so well said. Absolutely. It's such a good metaphor for that. And Nicholas, I know there was a lot that you wanted to share about Bumblebee Stone that's kind of a different perspective. What do you have to tell us about it?
Admittedly, I was immediately drawn to this stone because of its brilliant colors, and nothing clicked for me. Nothing quite made sense. I consulted with Judy. I checked out what Michael Ginger had to say, and I understood their words, but I couldn't quite connect all the dots until I started to take a deeper dive into its composition. And it was specifically looking at the components through the lens of the stone medicine branch of Chinese medicine. That was like the aha moment for me. So as Kyle mentioned, we've got this like extraordinary mix of things that comes together to give us this really brilliantly colored rock. And um, this really interesting environment of like the fumaroles, those volcanic vents in which it accretes, is going to give us so much fire, and that is definitely one of the important things to take away if we use the wuxing, the five phases from Chinese medicine. It does have this very hot temperament, this very quick moving, consuming kind of energy. But it's not pure yang, it's not pure projection. There's this wonderful mix that's in there. So if we look at the iron components that are in it through the lens of Chinese medicine, iron has a relationship to physicality, to the blood. That's something that a lot of cultures arrived at because hemoglobin, the protein in our red blood cells, is iron rich. But it's also viewed like from the understanding of how iron affects the flow of qi or life force, prana if you prefer, in the human body. It is said to have a kind of descending quality. And in like modern crystal healer lingo, we might just say that that is grounding, right? It helps us get to this point of the flow of energy downward, earthward, inward, perhaps. But that's in really strong contrast to looking at the arsenic compounds that are in here. Primarily, we've got Realgar and Orpiment, as Kyle mentioned, and usually when we look at these arsenic sulfides in Chinese medicine, they are very alchemical. They are used in traditional medicine, although of course that is something we should take with a grain of salt. There are a lot of things that Western medicine used to do we no longer do because we know they will poison us. But just looking at the kind of historical uses through a symbolic lens, we can get a really kind of interesting perspective on this. So um, there is both inner and outer alchemy in Taoism, in Chinese medicine, just like we see in kind of the Western occult, Western alchemical tradition. And if we start to look at this through the lens of inner alchemy, it's about taking those leaden states within us and transforming them into something that is higher consciousness, higher perspective. Realgar in particular is known by the name Xiong Huang, which means more or less like yellow hero. It's got this heroic energy, and traditionally was only used in like really dire straits to kind of be that hero that pulls you back from the brink, whatever that might look like in your particular situation. And one of the ways it does this is by lighting a kind of inner fire that has an ascending quality to it through the lens of qi. So we have this descending quality through the iron compounds. We have this ascending quality through the arsenic compounds. And then we've got the calcite, which almost acts, I mean, physically, it is a binder. It is the thing that amalgamates. All these carbonates are going to hold the rest of the stuff together because it's essentially just really pretty travertine. But this gives us a kind of stabilizing effect. We've got the calcium content in our bones. Things like chalks and other kinds of calcium compounds are used in Chinese medicine as binders, as fixatives, as stabilizers, among other things. And so it's helping these kind of contrary motions find an equilibrium, find a sense of balance, a still point within, so we don't get weighed down or burn ourselves out. So we aren't too yang or too yin all of the time. And the kind of magic of all of this is it makes it the perfect stone for inner transformation. And even more than this, it's like translating the inner changes that that we experience, so this Negong, this inner alchemy, into an outward expression. It helps us alchemize our hopes, our dreams, our wishes, our past into something that is actionable and tangible. It is the fuel that gives us the creativity, the charisma, the joy we need to see things through to completion. And I just think it is such a wonderful stone when we feel stuck or weighed down, because it has this mediating force and it has a really strong buoyancy to it. And even if it does require a little extra caution to handle, it is definitely a wonderful stone to get us into that mindset of alchemy.
One thing I just want to point out to everyone who's listening or watching right now is I don't know if you've noticed, but the dynamism that has changed in all of our voices and how everyone is like, you'll notice sometimes when we're talking about certain stones, we'll actually come down a little bit, but I don't know if my friends here would agree with me, but I'm noticing even if I'm sitting here listening and talking and that type of thing, I'm getting excited. It's almost as though there's adrenaline pumping and that type of thing as well. So if you're not even sure what a crystal does, yeah, listen to Crystal Confab. Check out all our social media. But just sitting with it, you might actually subtly start to feel. And I think compared to this episode, if you go jump to another episode, you'll probably notice we're talking at a faster rate today than we normally are. Has anyone else noticed that?
Now that you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah. I do want to talk a little bit about bees as well, because it's obviously they're the namesake of this stone. Do you think this would be a great stone? You know, the plight of bees, we know that they're endangered around the world. We hear these things, this information that if we lose bees, we're next because they basically are the key pollinators and that type of thing. There are obviously physical things we can do, not using certain pesticides, planting certain plants, all that type of thing. But on an energetic level, sometimes we want to go beyond just our own self-pursuits and we want to kind of help the environment. Do you think Bumblebee Stone as a grid crystal for helping bumblebees would be beneficial?
I'll jump in and say absolutely. This is actually something in one of my classes in my advanced crystal certification program. I have a class called Crystal Healing for Animals in the Environment. So we talk about things that you can do for, your pets and stuff like that. But on a larger scale, what can we do for the land, the water, general species, especially endangered species that need that energetic support? And crystal grids are one of the biggest things that we can do to lend support, to focus and channel our intention, our prayer, our energy, whatever you want to call it. They're great ways for doing distance healing work, right? Working with that grid. So incorporating, I think, some Bumblebee Jasper into that, obviously to connect with the energy of the bees, and then maybe something, for that gentleness. I could almost see like a pink opal to soothe, to support, to nurture, and then, something to carry your intention to the bees. That really dynamic pyrite we could kind of pull out of that stone and incorporate in a grid, some clear quartz to amplify. There are so many options, but I think that's a great idea. I'd love to hear what anyone else thinks about that.
I guess the other side of that, we can obviously give energy to the bees as a species on this planet energetically, and even, that could have a ripple effect. But there's also a bit of a two-way street here because there's obviously animal wisdom that we can gain from this as well. So humans see ourselves as this superior species. We build buildings and we've got the internet and we can talk around the world and all these different things. But if I was to take a group of us and put us in the middle of the wild, we wouldn't be doing so well after a couple of weeks. So every animal has found its way to thrive on this planet. And when we look at bees, we can really bring in what we might need to be able to thrive as well. And what I love about this is one of my favorite crystals that you can use for the solar plexus chakra because it brings in so many different elements of the solar plexus chakra and that bee energy in there. Now, how I like to talk about the solar plexus chakra is I remember once being stumped because I was asked to teach chakras to a group of 8 to 12-year-old children who loved crystals. I'm like, how do you explain these kind of complex, life-changing aspects of each of the chakras? And when it came to the solar plexus chakra, I simply described it as our own personal sun. And when it's underactive, we hide our sun away from the world. And you think about someone who's shy, they hide that away. And when it's overactive, we blind people with too much light and we dominate in that way. What we just want to do is we just want to shine beautifully. I think Bumblebee Stone can really, really help us with this. This is our energy center of empowerment and socialization. So it's a really great one for supporting people who, especially around, I love to work with the solar plexus chakra around the summer solstice. We're getting out there, we're being more social. But there's a lot of social awkwardness out there. We're worried, will I say the right thing? Will I say something stupid? How will I relate to these people? What do I say? And this brings in that dynamism. You can hear us in our speaking how we are more dynamic, more lively today as we speak. Not saying that we're flat other days, but that this really helps to bring that out and help to give you that confidence in that way. Another aspect is that I really love using the stone for working when it comes to friendship. We know and we hear talk about that there is a loneliness pandemic around the world, that we are more connected but feeling more isolated. And sometimes it may just be that you haven't found your crew. The fact that you're listening to a crystal podcast at the moment would suggest that you're probably not just mainstream, I'm going to use the word normal in inverted commas here kind of thing, that you might be a bit of a black sheep, and finding your groove, finding your people, finding your clan may be a little bit harder. And I would suggest even grabbing a Bumblebee Stone, holding it gently against your solar plexus chakra, feeling your light shine, and as that light shines, it wakes up other people around the world and brings the right friendship group to you as well. Now, also with the solar plexus chakra, bringing in that bee energy, think about what bees do. They're these little kind of insects that all fly out there. They do their little bit. They always look for the best in a plant as well. They don't land on leaves. They don't land on twigs. They land on the beautiful flowers. So they help us to be positive and see the light in other people. But then they all come together back to the hive or the hearth, and they're all working towards a greater good. So even whether it be socialization and overcoming in any situation, not just socialization and your social life, but work life power struggles, this is not going to be this is going to counteract power struggles. Beautiful for collaboration, beautiful for teamwork. Yes, it's a great one. I would definitely have it in your kitchen, as Ashley said, but I'd get another piece and I'd maybe put it in your workplace if you work with other people, so that you become a hive of activity, a hive of dynamism, a hive of collaboration where you're all working together. I think if we could balance the solar plexus chakras of everyone in the world, we'd get a lot more done and it'd be a lot more peaceful. Imagine if we could get the solar plexus chakras of all the world leaders balanced. And there's none of these kind of power struggles and trying to one-up each other and be better than someone else. It'd be really harmonious. So this really can help with that balancing of that energy center, bringing in that socialization on a personal level, but also could help on a kind of a larger scale as well. So I think there's so much potential in this stone.
I think that like any good, strong, yellow crystalline energy taps us into our will. It helps us to be better leaders. It helps us to like see what we can do in our own life. And it helps us kind of get out of our head and into action. And that's very like the sun shining. It's there, it's doing its thing. When we see it, we see it. And when we're turned the other way, we don't see it. But its energy is still there. Like it's still hanging out, but we're not having to like force things. I find Bumblebee Stone and bees in general, when you sit and watch them, the last few weeks, I sit in my yard, we have blue banded bees. They're not yellow bumblebees. They're these beautiful light blue banded bees. And they are really unique because they live singly. They like live by themselves in their own little hole. They self-pollinating. So as they go from one to another, they're actually pollinating as they go along, and they do the whole job all by themselves. They create all that they need to sustain themselves, and they only have 3 life cycles over the summer period. They're literally dormant during winter, and it's only as it gets hotter they wake up, and they have 3 cycles during summertime. So I've been really sitting and watching them and going, it's fascinating how they're able to have their own focus, have their own job, do their own thing, go after what they need to go after. And I think that's really important today, when we stop forcing ourselves to be someone that we're not, stop forcing ourselves to in comparison to other people. I can do this. I'm good at this. I can put my energy into this. That helps you to be a better leader in your own life, when you can actually see what you can do, when you stop worrying about what you can't do, where you can't control, and what you're not able to contribute to, you actually are able to vibrate on a level that helps you to attract the right energy towards yourself, the right people, the right situations. You are, I find it kind of links to that kind of calculated risk energy where it maybe it feels risky, maybe it feels a bit, there's a bit of trepidation there, but if you don't do it, maybe you're going to miss an opportunity. If you don't put yourself out there, maybe you're not actually going to get that flower. If you don't leave the hive and go out there during the daytime when the sun is out, during the summertime, are you wasting a bit of energy? Are you actually wasting a great opportunity for yourself by being too comfortable, by being too settled? I think we are, and we have been through a period where we've all been forced to stop and sit and look at ourselves, and it hasn't been fun. And I think Bumblebee Stone is really timely now, really to work on getting yourself out there, finding your place, finding your way to contribute in a way that feels good, in a way that isn't too much. And it's allows you to feel good about yourself, if that makes sense.
Got a bit of a question that I don't know if we know the answer to this, but this is a relatively new stone on the market. Does anyone know when it started to appear?
I did a little bit of reading on that, and it's actually been longer than we think, but it's only been since like the 60s, I think the 70s, when it was gone. Some people were like, oh, this is really pretty. Let's use it more for ornamental stuff. People started to go, oh, I've actually seen it, so we're going to use it. But I think if you actually look into Indonesian culture and Southeast Asian culture, they have been using it for quite a long time, and there are older pieces and older connections, but it's in our modern, literally in our modern world, that we know about it, and we've been using it more.
And I would say like in terms of the larger mineral market, it really started to gain some traction probably around 2010, right in there, 2010, 2011.
I know that in Germany it got popular earlier than here in America, and they originally called it eclipse stone. That stark solar yellow with black contrast, just like the annula around an eclipse.
Hmm. I just wonder, I have a working theory that isn't totally thrashed out, but the different crystals present themselves to the world at different times. There was a couple that came out, I think Quantum Quattro was around 1996, a couple that came out just before 2000. I'm just kind of reflecting on why did Bumblebee Stone make itself present to the world in the 2010s? Was it preparing or supporting us for something like that? Any thoughts on that, anyone? I'm just talking on the fly now, or talking on the Bumblebee, I should say.
I totally think crystals, even if they're not discovered at the time, they come into our like universal psyche or cultural psyche at the right time, when we need them, when we require them, when they're meant to be here. For example, like I think it's the rise of, for me, morganite recently in jewelry, especially for relationships and for engagement stones, like the popularity and the rise, moving away from diamonds as an engagement stone to a softer, more, I don't know, a more heartfelt, loving energy. I'm seeing it so much more. And I think it's the timing. We want a bit more of that love. We want a little bit different energy. And I think we attract those crystals.
I would love to know what everybody thinks about that, like on an individual level, because I see what you're saying, Adam, like on this larger scale, right? That maybe, something either gets more popular or is discovered in a bigger way, or a new pocket will be found or something like that. But what about on an individual level? Have you found that like the right stone makes its way to you at the right time in your life?
I can totally attest to that. And I will look forward to talking about it in our next podcast in our Feds tonight. I will dive into that deeply. But I think Nicholas has an answer too.
I think the answer for me is sometimes. Sometimes I see something and I go, oh, shiny, I don't have this in my collection. Or that's a really weird name that I'm not going to say out loud with an audience for the first time. And I get it. And it sits for years and years and years. And it's almost like I have to rediscover it exists. And so I think it's kind of situational. Lots of us, when we are shopping from a like connected kind of place, will be naturally drawn to the things that are appropriate for whatever the situation might be. But sometimes when we are little dragons hoarding our treasures, indiscriminately. We just get stuff whether or not we have that deep relationship to it yet. But I'll tell you, there have been times that I was really grateful that that inner dragon was hoarding treasures, because it meant I didn't have to go out and buy that weird thing with the unpronounceable name.
Yeah, I think one classic example for me is Herderite. You know, as I was going along my crystal journey, at one point I discovered the Synergy 12 by Robert Simmons. I was like, oh, okay, they must be good crystals to have. And for some reason, Herderite that one just did nothing for me. I didn't get it. I didn't try and find it and that type of thing. But it was probably 2 years ago where things were happening and I went, hold on, let's go back and read a bit more about this and kind of reflect on this. And it was exactly perfect for the time. So I think what Nicholas was saying about that sometimes we buy it and it might be for, you know, maybe we're future proofing. It's kind of like in Australia, we have our superannuation or the 401k in America, where we're waiting for later and we'll need that. So I'm very prepared because I'm sure, like the rest of you, we've all got a big stash just in case for the future. But I also think for anyone who's listening, they might be going, oh, you know, we talk about some rare crystals sometimes, and you're like, where do I find it? And we often get questions about that. Now, Ashley would be a great place to pursue first and check out her online store. But sometimes I find the rarer crystals also will present themselves when they're ready. Now, they'll either say, buy me today, use me later, or buy me today because you need me now. So I think just sit with that. And we'd love to hear in the comment section what people's experiences have had on that. But yeah, just like the right people come into our lives at the right time for maybe a lesson or for support for a season, reason, or a lifetime, I think crystals probably do as well.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So, Bumblebee Stone, I think hopefully we haven't worn you all out as we've been talking about it, because we've all got excited. We're all going to go have a lie down now with something a lot more calmer. But if you're needing a bit of dynamism in this dynamic world, if you need to collaborate with other people, if you need, you know, I love how Nicholas was talking about that kind of, I could see how this would help in a busy life of that kind of grounding, that descending, but also that ascending. So remaining grounded as you rise in the world. You know, we've got the holiday season. We need it for that. There are so many reasons why we need to talk about Bumblebee Stone today. And we hope that you've enjoyed this confab. We'll be back next week when we dive into another fascinating crystal. Until then, take care and blessed be.